Ken Klippenstein with another amazing report for The Intercept, delving into one of the people working for Congressman Matt Gaetz. This is DERRICK MILLER, former US Army National Guard sergeant who apparently spent 8 years in prison for murdering an Afghan civilian back in 2010, is now out and is working as a legislative assistant covering military policy for Matt Gaetz. You can see a photo of DERRICK MILLER right here. So first of all, here are the details. And I'm getting this from Ken Klippenstein, but he's a reporter that I trust. He says that while on a combat mission in Afghanistan, this is back in September 2010, Miller shot 27-year-old Atta Mohammed in the head during an interrogation. So from Miller's statement, he says he was acting in self-defense. Mohammed had walked through the defensive perimeter established by Miller's unit, could be a threat to his unit, and had tried to grab Miller's weapon during the interrogation. Where have we heard that before from cops constantly? But a different National Guard member testified that he heard Miller threaten to kill Mohammed if he didn't tell the truth, then sat on top of him. Mohammed was lying prone at the moment, before shooting him in the head, killing him. According to the prosecutor, Miller then said, "I shot him, he was a liar." Not he was grabbing my gun after when you're sitting on him, but he was a liar, so he needed to be shot in the head. So Mohammed's body was also left in a latrine, which is not what you're supposed to do, clearly. And eventually you had Miller sentenced to life in prison back in 2011 before being released on parole following a lobbying effort for his release. So he did spend those years in prison. Now, he has previously served as a military advisor for Representative Louis Gohmert. That's from July 2019 to September of last year. And he says that, or he was the executive director of a group, Congressional Justice for Warriors Caucus, which describes itself as, quote, dedicated to educating members of Congress about combat-related incidents where US service members who are fighting for our freedoms have been unjustly incarcerated under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So, look, I've always been of the opinion that after you do your time, you deserve to be able to live a life. I think we can have a debate about whether 8 years is enough for apparently executing a person that you think was being dishonest to you, according to some witnesses. But specifically being brought in to talk about military matters when you are alleged to have committed war crimes, that seems like it should be beyond, like you can't find anyone else who isn't alleged to have executed someone, a civilian, for no reason. Benny, what do you think?
I mean, the unfortunate reality is, like, look, knowing Republicans, like, that's exactly what they want, right? That's what they want. They want somebody that's so shameless and violent. And look, I as somebody who was in the military and literally had to make arguments about why it is inappropriate to label literal children as military-aged males, I will tell you this, that the culture within the military is nightmarish. And the degree to which humanity is completely disregarded within the military is horrific. It is fundamentally horrific. There is so much needless death. And I could talk about this for a long time because there are many layers to it. But like ultimately, like we need to understand that for somebody to even like face any charges within the military or anything like that for going too far, that takes a lot. That takes a lot, a significant breach from the already toxic and violent culture that exists within the military. Because the unfortunate reality is what dominates the military today is a lot of racism and xenophobia and the fundamental dehumanization of anybody that is on the other side of a firearm, the other side of the camera, the other side of you name it. It really is just built around pretending as though the people who are quite literally victimized by our imperialist violence are like less than human or something like that. And it really is just as bad as you might think it is. It's probably worse.
Yeah, like so Ken does this great story. It's probably gonna get quite a bit of, like a lot of people are gonna read it. Does anyone think that Matt Gaetz is like worried about this coming out? Like, does anyone think that there will be pressure from Republicans to not have somebody who's done these things advising in military? No, like they don't care. This isn't even like a unique thing in the Republican Party. It's not even a unique thing for Matt Gaetz. Back in 2019, Gaetz wrote a letter to Trump on behalf of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, who we talked about at the time, then charged with war crimes in relation to the killing of an Iraqi prisoner of war in Mosul in 2017. Gallagher was charged with stabbing a 17-year-old ISIS prisoner to death, posing with his corpse and sending the photo to friends. And Gaetz and many right-wingers felt, Why is he receiving pushback for this? Why are you acting as if it's a bad thing? This was an ISIS person. It doesn't matter if they're a prisoner. You can just walk up to them with a knife, stab them to death, and then pose for selfies with the body. Why are you pretending that that's a bad thing? Gaetz has spent years defending people who have done these sorts of things. And we point it out because I think that it's objectively bad. I know their audience will care, but again, not because we believe they're gonna care. If you're a conservative watching this, like I would love to see a message from a conservative who agrees that it's unacceptable to execute captives or to murder civilians. Like, I understand that it was a conservative who did it, so it's gonna be difficult for you to admit that it was wrong. But anyone, maybe a Christian can have a problem with executing civilians. I feel like there's probably something in the Bible about that being a bad thing. Thou shalt not, you fill in the blank, something about killing. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. Any final thoughts, Benny?
I mean, you mentioned Christian. Look, there are a lot of people in the United States military that are of the belief that the role of the United States is to bring about some sort of biblical apocalypse. So unfortunately, that's not necessarily a good indicator of whether or not somebody's gonna have empathy.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.